If the Philadelphia Eagles are looking for the safest prospects that can contribute right away as rookies, who should they target in the 2025 NFL Draft? I'll tell you coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to this Friday edition of the show. We are brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Armada Player of the Week later on in the show. Maybe it'll be a prospect that's a sure thing, slam dunk, day one contributor for the Philadelphia Eagles that comes out of this 2025 NFL Draft. And when you look at the Eagles' newfound philosophy over the last few years of playing rookies, second-year players right away as starters, especially 2024 was really the change in Howie Roseman's philosophy. Over the years before that, you saw guys kind of being redshirted at times like Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean and Cam Jurgens sitting behind veterans that you already had in the lineup. A lot of the times in that 2016 to 2020 window, the Doug Peterson, Carson Wentz era, a lot of those years, veterans got the nod over young players who weren't given really time to grow on the field because they were in this win now window and they wanted those veterans to play. But now, Howie Roseman, he has added young players over the last few years that he expects to play right away. And when you look at the way this roster is constructed with so many players on offense getting top 10 money, and you look on defense, there's going to be more guys that get that kind of money, like Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith, and eventually even like Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. Zach Bond got that deal this offseason. Those young players playing right away, having those rookie inexpensive contracts in your starting lineup, it's even more crucial than it's ever been. So if that is kind of a new mindset for the Eagles, and they start prioritizing ready to contribute day one starters from the draft, not just through free agency, and they start to prioritize the floor sometimes over the ceiling, who are those safe picks the Eagles could go with, especially in a draft like this, where it's not a great draft class from top to bottom. It's one of the weaker classes in the last few years. Maybe they do go safer this year. And if they do, who are those prospects that you can say have a high floor? Maybe they don't have as high of a ceiling as some other prospects, but right away they can fill a hole that the Eagles need them to fill. And look, it's not always black or white, one thing or the other. It's not just a prospect can have a high floor, but also a high ceiling, right? I mean, there are slam dunk prospects like that, but at the same time, if the Eagles do prioritize maybe the floor in this class, I could see a lot of prospects being a good fit. And of course, with the Eagles, the way their coaching is set up, how good it is on both sides of the ball, they can afford to take riskier players who will be more pro-ready from day one in Philly than they'll be with other teams. Like you look at Jalix Hunt last year, I think is a perfect example of that. But anyway, I digress. Let's get into some of those prospects that I think could really help the Eagles from a safety perspective. Not the position, but from a floor, a good player that isn't a big risk kind of move. Who are those guys the Eagles could take? Number one, North Dakota State interior offensive lineman Gray Zabel. I think this is one of the safest picks they can make in the draft, whether it's through a small trade up or they sit there at 32 and they take the North Dakota State lineman who I think is going to be best suited to play guard long-term, maybe center, but he can also play tackle. That's why he's safe, is he's a Swiss Army knife. He's versatile. And it's not just that he can play every position okay. He plays all of them very well. Pro Football Focus actually graded him out with an elite grade of 88 or higher at every position, at center, at guard, and at tackle when he was at NDSU. So he's versatile. He's good at all three spots. So you can plug him and play basically wherever you want him to be long term. And he does have a ceiling. You're not sacrificing the ceiling for the floor. The Eagles love to take raw athletic score players, like the RAS Kings, right? Gray Zabel had an RAS score of 9.48 out of a best possible 10. So he's a really good athlete. He's explosive, really quick feet off the line of scrimmage. He's versatile. I think Jeff Stoutland would love to get somebody like Gray Zabel in the first round. He's a player that we don't talk about as much. I think he's projected to be more of an interior offensive lineman than a tackle at the next level. I don't think he's the Lane Johnson replacement long term, but I think he can be your long-term starting right guard. And he also could play tackle for sure. He could be that swing player. I think Gray Zabel is one of the safest prospects in this draft. Another guy on the offensive line, I think, is more of an option at 32 than a trade up. Maybe he's even an early second round pick if you trade down from 32 to, let's say, like a small trade up with Cleveland or a team in the 30s on day 2 that wants to move up for a quarterback. I think a guy like Oregon offensive lineman Josh Connerly, for a lot of the same reasons as Gray Zabel, would make a ton of sense. Like, he is a very safe prospect. Is he the biggest tackle in the world from a height perspective? No. Does he have the longest wingspan compared to some other, like, is he built like Mekhi Becton? No. I think he's more of a average size offensive lineman. He's not super powerful, not super long, but like Gray Zabel, I think he can play tackle and guard. Played exclusively pretty much at left tackle when he was with the Ducks, but I think he projects very well on the inside as well, especially with Jeff Stoutland developing him in year 1. And Connerly is a quick, athletic offensive lineman, and the Eagles like having that kind of player to get up to that second and third level, play zone in the run game. Josh Connerly's a player I think the Eagles would like a lot, and I was watching his tape the other day, the one-on-ones that he had against Abdul Carter at Penn State. And it was really impressive how Connerly was holding his own. Like, he is really quick off the line of scrimmage. And I think that's really important to have that explosiveness from a footwork perspective as an offensive lineman when you don't have the power, when you don't have the length. I think Connerly could come in right away, beat out Tyler Steen and Kenyon Green as the starting right guard. And I think he, unlike Zabel, does project more at tackle long-term because, of course, he played it at the University of Oregon. I think he could be your long-term right tackle when Lane Johnson hangs him up. Or if you want a higher potential player, more of an elite player to target at right tackle eventually, you can keep Connerly at right guard and boom, that's a 10-plus year starter next to Cam Jurgens. So I think those are two of the safest picks that Howie Roseman could make on day 1. Is one of those versatile offensive line pieces. And you guys know I'm a big fan of Donovan Jackson from Ohio State, but I think the two safer picks are Gray Zabel from NDSU and Josh Connerly from Oregon. And then this guy I talk about a lot. When you talk about tight end, after Tyler Warren, after Colson Loveland, I think Mason Taylor is one of the safest picks you can make, not just at tight end, but within this entire draft. Like, he's just so good at pretty much everything. Like, he is not as elite of a run after the catch weapon as Tyler Warren or Harold Fannin. He's not as big of a prospect going up and getting the football, contested catch ability like, a Gunnar Helm or an Elijah Arroyo, right? But he does everything really well, right? He checks all the boxes. He is athletic. He's one of the best separators in this class. I think he's got some of the best hands as well. He's just one of the more complete players in this class. And in a weaker receiver class, in a tight end class that after the top 2, it gets a little more like pick your poison. These guys have certain key strengths, but also have a lot of weaknesses. Mason Taylor doesn't have a lot of weaknesses. Like, I think you could pick him at 32, and is he going to be Dallas Goedert from a ceiling perspective? Maybe not, but I think he can be more like Zach Ertz, where he's just a elite separator for a tight end, standing up as that Y. Like, he's not going to be a hand in the dirt tight end a whole lot, but I think he's just going to be a very reliable tight end for a very long time. And I think he could do a lot worse than Mason Taylor in this draft. So those are the 3 players on offense, I'd say. Gray Zabel, Josh Connerly, and Mason Taylor. On defense, if the Eagles are going to prioritize the floor, they want pro-ready starters that can contribute right away as rookies. I think Boston College edge rusher Donovan Ezereku is one of the most pro-ready guys in this class. Like, the production is obviously already there. 17 and a half sacks from Boston College. You see the motor. You see the work ethic. You see the leadership ability off the field. I think he'll get better against the run. He's a powerful player. I just think Ezereku can step in right away and I think be that third guy in the rotation with Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt. And then you let, Azeez Ojulari and Joshua Uche battle it out for snaps. Ezereku, if they draft him, I don't even think he's going to be available at 32 or even inside the top 20. I made the prediction the other day. I think he's the second edge rusher off the board after Abdul Carter. I just think he's the safest bet compared to James Pierce. Like, compared to Pierce and Shamar Stewart and Mike Green, a lot of those guys have very obvious question marks. I don't know what the very obvious question mark is with Ezereku's game. It's just very solid all around. And then on the defensive line for Oregon, 2 Oregon Ducks players are very safe. Josh Connerly, and then on defense, defensive tackle Derek Harmon. Derek Harmon, like, if you want production out of college, if you want a starter right away that can be your 2A, 2B with Moro Ijoma, I think Derek Harmon can be that guy. He led all defensive tackles last year in pressures, according to Pro Football Focus. He was 4th overall among all tackle prospects in the draft in pass rush win rate. Like, that's a good player. I think that could come in and be a high floor player in that rotation with Jordan Davis, Moro Ijoma. I think that's what you're kind of looking for. And he's a pass rush specialist. That's what the Eagles want in whatever player they bring in. That's why I saw they visited with Talik Williams from Ohio State. Don't love that. I think he's a slower, more of a nose tackle type. I'm not a big fan of Kenneth Grant, honestly, for what the Eagles need either. I would say Derek Harmon, after Walter Nolan, is that next defensive tackle that I really like for the Eagles on day one. And then one more safe, pro-ready player the Eagles could take on day one. And again, this doesn't mean we're sacrificing the ceiling. And the Eagles love to go for ceiling prospects nowadays. They're not the Joe Douglas era of drafters where they're just going based on solely college production. And I don't think they're going to settle in the draft. Like, they took a risk on Quinyon Mitchell and I think Nolan Smith and Jalen Carter and Jalix Hunt. Like, they go for those kind of players. And I think they should continue. Like, that's, you guys know that's my thing. I'm an upside guy. I'm a ceiling guy, but that doesn't mean you have to have one or the other. You can go for a floor player as well. And again, with what the Eagles need, with the way they're building their roster, they need guys that have high floors. Like, I don't think a Shamar Stewart really helps them all that much in year one. Georgia safety Malachi Starks, comparatively speaking, when we're comparing him to Nick Emenwari of South Carolina, the consensus top 2 safety prospects, I think Starks, although Emenwari tested a lot better than Starks at his pro day, at the combine, I think Malachi Starks, his tape, it's just a lot more complete. He can wear a lot of hats. He can be a cover 2 deep safety. He is more athletic, I think, from a ball skills perspective, like going up and high pointing the football. I think he has better hands, better vision, can play in the box better. Like, Emenwari, I think, has a higher ceiling. But Starks, even though he didn't test out that well during the offseason, I think he's just a guy right away that you can put a lot on his plate and he's going to be able to handle it, just like most of those Georgia prospects. So again, I'm not saying the Eagles are going to settle in this draft, but in a weaker class where they need young players to play right away, they have some holes to fill, especially on the defensive line and the offensive line and in the secondary at safety. I think they could maybe add more emphasis on the floor, on safety. Again, not the position, but the idea of a prospect being safe. I think that could be more important to them this year than maybe in years past, because again, they need cost-controlled starters. Like, that's very important to add heading into 2025. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Again, I think this draft is weaker from a day one perspective, but it's loaded with talent on day 2. I think Howie Roseman should go all in on loading up for the second and third round. I'll tell you why coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. This episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by the Nissan brand new 2025 Armada. Each week, we're taking a look at our draft prospects that we're going to pick one guy that stands apart, just like the Nissan Armada, the guy we believed showcased the strength and power needed to push the Eagles forward in 2025 as we look ahead to next year, I should say. This week's Armada and clear-cut player of the week is going to be Josh Connerly. Again, like I said in segment 1, I think Josh Connerly can be that versatile starting offensive lineman. From the jump, he can be your right guard. I think he's going to beat out Tyler Steen and Kenyon Green. I think eventually you can start him long-term at right tackle to be the heir apparent to Lane Johnson. Just a very safe player, high floor guy you're not going to have to trade up for. In fact, you could even trade down for him and collect assets. Connerly, I think, is going to be one of the Eagles' favorite players if they're not aggressive in trading up. So he is our Nissan player of the week. And you can integrate verbiage that I think is key for Josh Connerly to Nissan as well. Heavy duty, rugged, conquers the road with capability and confidence. Dream big, go big. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what I think Josh Connerly can do in Philadelphia. It's clear that our player of the week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of their outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com today. So I think day 2 is really where the Eagles can make their money in the 2025 NFL draft. Again, day 1 has a lot of talent in the trenches on the offensive and defensive line. But if the Eagles can't trade up and it takes 2 to tango, I saw the report from Diana Rossini the other day, or more of speculation, that it might be harder for teams to trade up this year. Like, there's not going to be as many trades as there have been in years past. And that was kind of the case last year as well. Not a lot of movement up top. If that's the case, I think the Eagles should really focus on trading back to collecting assets for future drafts. Maybe you get an extra like if you can get another second round pick this year, maybe add another third this year or next year by trading away that 32nd overall selection. I feel like you're going to get a prospect in a very similar tier from that 33 to 50 range that you could get at 32, right? Like, what is the real difference between, let's say it is like a Derek Harmon, right? Or a Mason Taylor, or you come back around in the second round and you get a TJ Sanders from South Carolina, right? Or you get a tight end like Harold Fannin. I really don't think there's that much of a difference. So I think for the Eagles, if they can't trade up, Howie should go all in on day 2 prospects, because again, the drop off is not that significant. And why is that? Because these players are more like, a lot of these guys that are going to go in the first round, I think in years past, are more second round talents in a vacuum than they are day 1 picks. And so I think it should make more sense to try to get like 2 second round picks this year. And what I like the idea of almost trading down from 32. Like, let's say, hey, somebody, you want to come in for Jalen Milroe, you want to come in for Jackson Dart, get on up at 32, grab that 5th year option, give us your early second round pick like Cleveland. You want one of these guys, give us that top pick in the second round, and then maybe collect another pick in 2026, a second or third rounder. And then what I would do is be aggressive in the second round. So now you have a pick in the 30s on day 2, but you also have that 64th overall pick. I would then try to trade up from the 64th overall selection. So you have 2 high picks in the second round. Like, I just think that makes all the sense in the world. And then you can have a combination of 2 guys like Nick Scorton from Texas A&M and Xavier Watts from Notre Dame. You add an edge rusher and a safety, or you go Donovan Jackson, the interior offensive lineman from Ohio State, and then you come back around and trade up for Toledo defensive tackle Darius Alexander, or Texas A&M defensive tackle Shamar Turner, or if you want to keep going with defensive tackles, come back for South Carolina DT TJ Sanders, or even like a guy I think they would like a lot because they're going to go for size on the edge, Landon Jackson from Arkansas. There's a lot of these players that are on a very similar tier, if not the exact same tier, than whoever you're going to get with that 32nd overall pick. So I just think that makes more sense. Like, trade down from 32, have a top pick in the second round, collect some future assets in 2026, maybe even use a pick or 2 to move up in the second round from that 64th overall selection. Instead of having 32 and 64, I like the idea more of having a pick at, like, let's say 33 and 41. The Chicago Bears have the 39th overall pick and the 41st overall pick. Maybe you target Chicago and say, hey, we want one of those picks from you. We'll give you the 64th overall selection. Here's an additional, I don't know, 3rd, 4th round pick, whatever. Do a pick swap. I think that makes more sense for what this draft has to offer from a prospect perspective on both sides of the football. And when you look at the Eagles' track record in the second round, since Howie Roseman's been the general manager in both stints, going back all the way to 2012 when it really started to heat up for him, his track record on day 2, especially in round 2, is ridiculous. I mean, listen to this second round resume for Howie Roseman. He took Vinnie Curry and Michael Kendricks in 2012. Then he took Zach Ertz in 2013. Then he took Jordan Matthews in 2014, Dallas Goedert in 2018, Miles Sanders in 2019, Jalen Hurts in 2020, the greatest Eagles quarterback of all time, Landon Dickerson in 2021, Cam Jurgens in 2022, and then Cooper DeJean in 2024. I mean, listen to all those key players that helped you win multiple championships, long-term starters. Heck, even like the worst pick of all those guys, I would say, is like a Jordan Matthews or a Miles Sanders, and they were both key starters that were good in that rookie year window with Philadelphia. Miles Sanders helped you get to a Super Bowl in 2022. He brought stability to the running back position when there wasn't any in Philadelphia. I mean, even Vinny Curry and Michael Kendricks, good, not great starters, but very solid starters for the first Super Bowl roster in Eagles history. Michael Kendricks, people forget, was a really good player in 2017 when Jordan Hicks went down. It was him and Nigel Bradham at linebacker, and Vinny Curry was a long-term starter on the edge opposite Brandon Graham. Like, Howie Roseman kills it in the second round. And even you go to 2023, Tyler Steen was the top pick in round 3. He traded down in the second round. Tyler Steen could be a solid starting right guard for you this year. The third round, too, like, maybe you trade up in round 3 instead of from the 64th overall pick. I mean, look how good he's been in round 3 lately, taking Jalix Hunt, and he took Nakobe Dean. I mean, he took Tyler Steen and Sidney Brown. Those two could both pan out as starters in 2025. Keely Ringo, you traded an additional third rounder to move up for on day 3. Howie Roseman is just so good. And it's not just those 2 rounds. Like, day 3, he has gotten pro-ready players, it feels like, every single year. I just think with the way this draft, I think, is going to go, trading down on day 1, loading up for day 2 and for future drafts, I just think it makes the most sense for the Eagles. And they're just so good in those rounds. And their scouting department, their evaluation process has gotten better and better every single year. I'm fully confident if they don't have a first-round pick that they're still going to get guys to help you right away and long-term starters as well. So that would be my strategy this year. If you don't trade up, if nobody falls outside the top 20, right? And it takes 2 to tango for a trade, I'm not looking to make that pick at 32. Because, again, there's players I'm very comfortable with taking there. Like, there are some of these guys I just mentioned that I'd be comfortable with taking at 32. But you can get either that exact player on day 2 or a player on a similar tier and collect a future asset or another solid day 2 pick. That just makes way more sense to me than just sticking and picking. Sometimes I like just sitting there making the pick. It made sense last year for Quinyon Mitchell. It made sense 2 years ago for Nolan Smith. I don't think it makes sense for this year's draft at all. I don't think somebody's going to plummet where it's like, oh my God, James Pierce is on the board at 32. Maybe I'm wrong. The draft is unpredictable. Never say never. But I don't think that outcome is going to happen. All right, guys, we'll wrap up this Friday edition of the show. Coming up next, I'm thinking about draft what-ifs, draft redos. If there was a player I could add to this current Eagles roster that was kind of in a toss-up decision for the Eagles in a past draft, and they went with the other direction, the other pick, what draft pick would we undo and add a different player to this roster? I'll get into that coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. All right, we're wrapping up this Friday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. And I was talking to a friend who's a fan of a different team, and we were kind of talking about draft what-ifs. Like, what are the most obvious picks you'd love to have back, right? And one of them, obviously, is taking Justin Jefferson instead of Jalen Reagor in 2020. You would love to have that outcome. But that's not what I want to do here. What is a draft do-over that you would like to have back for Philadelphia? That's not super obvious. So it's not, instead of taking Jalen Reagor, you take Justin Jefferson or you trade up for CeeDee Lamb, right? Like, what's in, although you would not do that because the second round pick you would have used to get Lamb, you took Jalen Hurts with that pick. So never mind. Just take Justin Jefferson. But what's one that's less obvious that would have allowed a different player to come in and really help the 2025 Eagles? For me, I'm looking at 2022. The Eagles trade up for Jordan Davis. And Jordan Davis is a good player. Good, not great. A very, very good 2-down run-stopping nose tackle. He's getting better as a pass rusher. Had a big sack in the NFC Championship this year. Had a big sack in the Super Bowl. But his ceiling is still in question. Like, even if this is just who he is, that's a very solid player for a long time that I'd pick up the 5th-year option on. I'd give him a contract extension. I want Jordan Davis in Philly long-term. He's not a bust. But to meet the value of what the Eagles placed on him, which was a top 20 selection that they traded up for, he's going to have to become the pass rusher that Dexter Lawrence is or Vita Vea is, and I don't know if he's going to get there. So Jordan Davis is a good player, but I think they could get a great player at a position right now that they really need. So my draft do-over from the last, I'd say, 4 to 5 years, 4 to 5 draft classes, and there's not many because Howie's nailing these classes. But for me, it would be trading up for Kyle Hamilton instead of Jordan Davis. Imagine Kyle Hamilton coming out of Notre Dame, bringing, or just the player he is right now with the Baltimore Ravens. Imagine that version of Kyle Hamilton in this Eagles defense. Like that kind of size, wingspan, versatility at the safety position after trading away Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. And with no Kobe Dean out, Kyle Hamilton can be a player that you have in the box, is a good cover two deep safety. When Baltimore moved him back last year, that's when the defense got better. Imagine having that kind of range and size at safety. You guys know that's my favorite kind of player on defense. I was a big fan of Hamilton in 2022. He was one of my favorite ideas in that draft class. If I could have one draft do-over for the Eagles in recent years that's not as obvious as taking Justin Jefferson instead of Jalen Reagor, I think it would be Hamilton. Because again, right now, when you talk about the Eagles' biggest immediate need for 2025, yeah, you could talk about adding another pass rusher on the interior, another edge rusher, a potential starting right guard or long-term replacement to Lane Johnson. You could talk about competition for Keely Ringo at outside corner. The biggest need right now, and I like Sidney Brown, but the biggest need is a safety after Chauncey Gardner-Johnson got traded to Houston. So that would be my do-over, Kyle Hamilton. I think that's the most obvious one in my head from players that I think, man, that's one of them that got away. I don't know what you guys think. Hit me up at DiBiase LOE on X or at Locked On Birds. Let us know on our YouTube community page as well on YouTube at Locked On Eagles. That's going to do it for today's edition of the show. Thanks so much for tuning in and making us your first listen each and every day. Guys, make sure your second listen of the day is the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. Get to know all of these players through the eyes of Keith Sanchez and Damian Parsons, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Louie DiBiase signing off for now. As always, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.